Hello, friends. I'm super excited to be here today with a new guest. Her name is Ellen. Ellen is an entheogenic death and grief companion who embraces death as a vital ritual and practice for a liberated life. I'm so excited to have this conversation with Ellen today because I don't know if you listeners are experiencing this, but I have been experiencing a lot of grief myself, feeling the grief of the collective. So I brought Ellen today because I believe this is an extremely important conversation because grief is a portal to healing. And we've been holding a lot of grief in our bodies since childhood, grieving what we had, what we didn't have. And even as an adults, we grieve the life that we thought we'll be having right now, and we're not, and there's grief there. So this is such a big conversation. So Ellen, welcome. So good to see you.
Thank you so much for having me. It sounds strange to say, but honestly, grief has become one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I'm really grateful for the space and for the invitation to just be together and like feel through this, not just speak, but feel through it.
Yes, I am feeling there's like this energy is already going all over my body. So it feels very aligned to be here with you. And so let's start by the first paragraph when we open your website, entheogenic death and grief companion. So tell us more about that. What that mean? Does that mean?
Yeah, thank you. This is actually a call it a title or a role that I took on just this year. So this is something that I'm still I feel like fitting into. But I call myself an entheogenic death companion because I have been working with the sacred mushroom and with Mother Cannabis and with breath work. Breath work is very much a medicine too, but I feel like I've been working with these sacred earth medicines for a while now. And I was guided to take a death doula training retreat earlier this year. And in this 4-day retreat, I feel like my life completely changed.
Mm.
And I felt like my medicine work and my identity as a medicine person started to take a new form, or at least maybe it didn't take a new form, but it just sort of clarified why I was even on this path. And theogenic literally means to connect to the God within, to connect to the divine within. And so I think it's more commonly heard or known as like psychedelic medicines, right?
Mm.
Medicines that allow you to go into a different state of consciousness to connect. And in this state, I feel like, we can connect to spirit, we can connect to the dead, we can connect to our higher selves, our infinite essential selves, and really all the energy that surrounds us here in particularly the unseen. And so I choose to use the word entheogenic because I feel like the term psychedelic has been sort of co-opted by the Western um, ideologies. And so the word entheogenic, literally to connect to the divine within or the God within, just feels more clear and more close to what I feel like my relationship and experience with these medicines have been about. Um, it's spirit medicine, right? It's heart medicine. And I feel like it's really opened me up to the unseen and the spirits that we live and walk among, the spirits of the dead. So I think in realizing that my whole walk with the sacred mushroom in particular, helping me also befriend my own grief from losing my father when I was a teenager.
Mm.
Um, I think I started to see a bigger role emerge after this death doula retreat because I realized I actually am a death companion. Because when you're in these medicine journeys, you literally experience a death, and I think a lot of people call it ego death. That may be one form of experience, but I think you are literally walking into this unknown space, into this cave, this dark cave, not really knowing what to expect. And you release and you shed so much, and you come out of the other side, back into the ordinary world, kind of new, new and soft with brand new skin, like a baby. And so there's a birth that happens. There's a death and a birth that happens in these spaces. And while I do feel called to, I think, eventually work in the capacity of companioning people through the end of their physical life, in this moment in my own personal journey, I feel very much called to work with people who are going through big life transitions, which are essentially deaths. We go through so many deaths in our life, right? And many of us resist those deaths. We don't want the change, or we fear the change because we don't know what's on the other side of it. And so my work as an entheogenic death companion is to companion people through these big life transitions, through these deaths, to walk through them with grace, with a lot of openness, and facing their fear of what lies on the other side. And it's just been really beautiful to witness the evolution as people are allowing these deaths to happen. Because I think the way, if we allow ourselves to die, if we practice death in our lives, by the time we get to the end of our physical life, where we have to release our bodies, I feel like there's going to be a lot less regrets there. And I think that's really what motivates me the most. Like, I don't want to live my life feeling like I didn't say everything I wanted to say, or do everything I wanted to do, and take the chances I wanted to take for fear. And so that's something I feel really called to guiding and companioning people through.
I love it. I love it. It's so unique because as guides, coaches, therapists, I'm not attached to any of those titles, but we are companions. I love that we are literally companions walking with our clients or friends. I call them, I don't even call them my clients anymore, because like Ram Dass says, if I call them a client, then I have to be the coach or the therapist. So I reflect on that. It's like, wow, that is so true. There's already a separation there. So I'm calling my clients now my reflections,
Ooh, I love that.
because there's that teaching and learning that is happening simultaneously. So I'm calling my clients my reflections. And we holding each other hand. Again, I'm gonna quote Ram Dass, who is somebody I adore, that says we just walking each other home, which
Mm.
is so beautiful. And the word companion really resonates. Um, so let's go to this quote. If you die before you die, you won't die when you die. And I love that is something that I've been working with myself in my meditation, especially when I'm feeling the contractions and the resistance in my body. And now I want to say I know enough at this point that when I am in that space of contraction, is because something it's really trying to die, because there's something brand new coming. And as much as I do this work, it's uncomfortable because there's still an aspect of me that wants to feel or be in the space of more pleasure than that pain. It's so hard, especially when I have these days when I feel so blissful and I'm expanding. I can't help but wanting to attach to that state and wanted to be in that state, as much as I know that the contraction is as important as the expansion, or the death is as important, so the birth can come. So walk us through a little bit of what does this process look like? Like, I know a lot of people are listening to this, they're going to this process, but they don't have the words or the description. So describe a little bit what it looks like for yourself, for your clients. What if you die before you die? What does it look like?
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think it's a big question. And I
Mhm.
think it looks different for every body, right?
Right.
Different people and different situations. But I love this quote. I actually learned about this quote through the book, The Immortality Key, which I'm still in the middle of, by a man named Brian Muraresku. And it's engraved, I think, on a uh, cathedral in somewhere in Greece is where I kind of remember that this is where you can find this quote. But to die before you die, so you don't die when you die, to me, it really speaks to leaning into that contraction that you were just talking about and allowing that contraction to be there. And I want to kind of go back to even, I've been noticing that in my own personal healing journey, each year kind of has this sort of core central theme of something that I'm working through. And a lot of the events in my life that show up in that year will always address that theme. So for me this year, it has really been centered around getting back into right relationship with myself so that I can be in right relationship with the earth, with nature, with other human beings, with the medicine. That was actually the impetus of this sort of like theme. I wanted to be in right relationship with the medicine that I work with, the sacred mushroom, with cannabis, and I didn't want to be extractive. And instead, the medicine showed me actually, in order to be in right relationship with us, you need to be in right relationship with yourself, meaning you need to honor the natural cycles,
Mm.
the expansion and the contraction. And I love that you spoke about and actually use the word contraction because this literally came through a mushroom journey that I had taken last year. It was my own journey where they were showing me smoke and like how you can't really grab onto smoke. Like there's nothing to grab onto. There's just like in life, there's nothing to attach to really. Everything is very temporary. And it followed with them pointing down to my breath and
Mm.
showing me like with every expansion, there's a birth, and with every contraction, like every exhale, there's a death. And it's constantly happening. And I think in that moment, in that journey, it hit me in such a profound way because I was like, oh my gosh, what a beautiful design our bodies are. That this crucial foundational mechanism, which propels this entire universe, this expansion and contraction, is literally, it's like the truth of it is buried in plain sight, or, like hidden in plain sight in our breath, like in the mechanism that allows us to be here in these bodies on this earth, doing what we do, like doing life. I'm even getting chills as I'm talking about it. It's such a like, I think it hit me in that journey where I was like, oh my God, this is genius. And so it really focused me on this feeling of expansion and contraction. And what does that look like in life? Honoring the expansion and honoring the contraction, knowing when to rest, knowing when to be active. And so when I'm working with my clients, whether it's through medicine journeys or through mentorship, a lot of it is just coming back into the body and just giving them permission and space to be with what the body is experiencing, feeling those really uncomfortable, painful, contractive moments, feeling the insecurity, the fear, and just kind of starting to work through like inner child work starts to emerge through this kind of somatic work. We start to really reconnect to previous versions of, the people I work with. And I feel like in the medicine space, particularly with the sacred mushroom journeys, what they're also connecting to is something so much greater that's around them. This idea of these natural cycles, this idea that nothing is permanent, that everything is constantly changing. And just being able to lean into that, through this invitation, through this medicine, I feel like they start to connect to the energies that are beyond who they are. Because I think sometimes the fear in the unknown is like, I was sitting with this after the retreat. I think all fear is a fear of death. Fear of abandonment is a fear of death. That's kind of like the origin of that is like way back when we were tribal, and if you were ostracized from your tribe, that certainly meant death. And when you start to look at all the fears in life, fear of being seen, fear of being heard, fear of, not being good enough, not being worthy enough, all of it in some way, shape, or form kind of tracks back to this fear of abandonment and rejection, which ultimately leads to fear of death. So when you look at fear that we experience, that numbs us or that keeps us paralyzed from taking these chances or allowing the change to happen, I think what we're really dealing with is a fear of death. So how do you allow yourself to go through this experience where it's not just you, you're not standing there by yourself walking through this portal. You have the help of this entire unseen world. You have your ancestors, you have the earth, you have the sun, you have all, aside from other human beings, there's so many spirits that are guiding you along. And I think sometimes we develop that tunnel vision where it's like we feel like it's all on us to go through this crazy change. And I don't know if I'm going to survive this. And I don't know what's on the other side. But when you start to widen out, and this is where the medicine becomes so powerful, the spirit medicine, you start to feel this team around you. And I think those of us who've been on this path and do connect to our spirit guides and have relationships with our guides, we even then I find that I still sometimes have to remind myself it's not all just on me. So I help to open them up, and we do a lot of altar work actually to prepare for these medicine journeys. We do a lot of altar work during the mentorship program to start to open up the channels to speak to these mm, guides and greater forces that are here to support us through these changes.
Mhm. Wow. Thank you for that. That was beautiful. I have so many questions, so many, but I'm going to start with a fundamental question that I always ask my new guests. Do the name of this podcast, Rebranding God, there's it's an intentional name. It's a name that I already shared this with my audience, that I was afraid to call it name. It was just an idea. And I was just going to call this podcast Beautiful Conversations. And then I was doing a meditation where I received this guidance like, no, call Rebranding God. You're afraid to even say the name, and don't be afraid.
That's
Because the
beautiful.
idea, one of the intentions here to this great conversations, heart-centered conversations, is to help with the death of this misperception of God that we can call source energy, the essential self, the creator of all, whatever that is, universal energy, and demystify this root of suffering that so many people, so many of my own clients still see God as a man, as a punisher, as somebody that is watching if they being a good person. And this separation has, I mean, we can
Mm.
just turn the news and see what a mess this separation has made. And I find fascinating, and I was even in a meditation before I started this conversation with you, seeing that the first separation that we need to heal is the separation that we have inside us with our younger self. That's why you and I really resonate in the conversation of the importance of inner child healing, which I want to get into a little later in this conversation. But how important, because if we don't establish this union inside us, we're never going to be able to establish union with our beloveds, with nature, and much less with God.
Yeah.
And the interesting, I have this saying, I stumble unto God while I was healing my inner child. And even though since I was a kid, I always believed in God, but was that typical church growing up in, going to Catholic schools and believe, yeah, there's a God, but there's always a separation. And it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't until I start working with medicines. I work with MDMA, which I call heart medicine. I work with um, mushroom as well. And it wasn't until I started doing these medicines that I really embodied the concept of like, wow, I'm not separated. But even after the medicines, there's so much integration involved every single day, because I feel like there's also these forces you can call dark forces, you can call whatever, I call just dark energies, that want us to stay separated from the divine, wants to separate us from God.
Mm,
And these forces are present every single day. And I like to work with these forces from the belief that the dark is here to serve the light,
mm, mhm.
the polarities. With that said, after my long discourse here, how would you explain your connection with God, divine source energy? Was that always present for you, or is something that you start experiencing more through the plant medicine? So walk us through
Yeah.
this your journey with the divine.
Thank you for this. Honestly, I feel like it's beautiful that we are connected by this mutual friend, Roseanne,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of the work that I did with Roseanne in 2020 had a lot to do with religious trauma because I
Mm.
grew up in the church. I grew up Christian.
Please
And
talk about that.
yeah, it's the separation that you're talking about is so real. And it's not even like because it wasn't the Catholic faith where, I had I had to go through a priest to get to God. The separation was this belief that I wasn't good enough to connect to God. I am a sinner. I am completely, damned, and there's something inherently wrong or evil or whatever word you want to choose in me that I'm not good enough to connect directly. And I think growing up in the church and having a lot of like heaven and hell conversation you know, and then having a father pass away when I was 15 who didn't go to church with us and me still very much indoctrinated in the church at the time, feeling like here's this beloved parent who I will never spend eternity with in
Mm,
this tradition. He's in hell because he was not a churchgoer and did not believe in the Christian God.
mm,
And so there was a lot of anguish there and a lot of like confusion. And I think that I always had a connection to the divine because even when I was going to church as a small child, and that turned into, leading Bible study and all kinds of stuff, I was very involved. And I always felt it's like when you're singing the hymns or whatever and you feel the spirit inside of you and you feel moved to tears. I always had that experience as a young person. And so to me, that was my connection to the divine. But I thought that it had to be through this Christian faith where I prayed to Jesus and all this stuff. And I don't think it was until I left my career in, 2018, started on this spiritual healing path that was completely unconscious. I didn't think that I needed this kind of healing, but of course, my aunt, I really attribute it to my dad on the other side of the veil, kind of guiding me along with my grandmother, my nai, them working together and going, okay, it's time for Ellen to like start to, get into this stuff and really see the truth.
mhm,
And so I think it really started with breath work for me, breathing and doing this work and connecting to my dad's spirit through breath work and starting to realize, oh, I can have a relationship with him on this side of, of death, and through meditation connect to his spirit. And then I would receive the signs, and it's like I was starting to open up little by little, layer by layer, to seeing the synchronicities that there is this whole unseen layer around us, and that is the divine, and I think it really is through the portal of death that I started to really kind of reestablish this relationship to the divine. um, I remember working with Roseanne, and she had given me this one homework assignment to heal this divide, right, the separation. And she had me go back to my cabin and just recite this mantra: may my will be the will of the divine. May my will be the will of the divine. So as a, disciplined, studious little person, like this is 2020, I went back and I was meditating like so many hours a day. Like it was just such a profound time of awakening for me during that lockdown. And I kept on reciting this mantra. And one morning, I don't even think I was doing it for very long, like maybe a day, I was very consciously bringing it into my field. So I was just with it all the time. But as I was saying those words, may my will be the will of the divine, suddenly I stopped and I realized my will is the will of the divine because I am divine. And it was this 180 breakthrough moment where suddenly the tears came and I cried like I had never cried before for a long time. And there was just something that just completely and broke that separation, you know? I'm still getting chills as I'm talking about it, but it was a really profound moment in my healing to realize like there is no separation between me and God. I am God. God is me. God is in me. I am, I'm fully connected.
Whew.
And yet sometimes I have to keep on reminding myself of that even now.
I I relate to everything you said so much because I had a similar mantra, and I believe it was Roseanne also that taught me that mantra, which is my will is God's will. And I'm using especially lately, God's will is my will, because I can see my tendencies to go back to that place that I need to make decisions versus if I surrender my free will and just give it to it's God's will. Um, it's a much higher frequency place to operate from, because I'm finding that using those old 3D systems of goal setting and decisions don't work so well anymore. It's falling apart, and we can, that's another whole conversation. Um, the part that I want to share with you and the audience is the part that you said you had that almost like that recognition that you are the divine and you had tears. I had a similar experience a few months ago, maybe less. And I relate to because you said a lot of start happening for you in 2020, and 2020 I can call the year of my initiation to this path. And it start with, of course, around Roxanne. I think she has the power to really help people to initiate. I really do. I was in Sedona, and we were talking a lot about Dolores Cannon, and I I felt Dolores Cannon visit me in the middle of the night when my whole body was vibrating. So I was initiated by Dolores Cannon, which was one of her teachers. But anyway, fast forward, I remember a year ago or a little less, I was really in this space of wanting love, want to attract a partner. I was almost like in this painful place, like really longing for partnership. And I wanted to heal that. I didn't want to be in that place of like feeling like, oh, I need a partner so I can be happy, or I need a partner because that's the only way I'm going to be the best version of myself. I put so much of the emphasis outside, and I started going really deep in my meditations. And I remember one day I was meditating and I was work with my inner child, was work with the divine energy, and this kind of almost felt like a lightning bolt hit me, and this voice came that sound like, you are the one you've been looking for.
Wow.
And to me, that is the same as saying, and from that moment, I learned two things. And that to me is truth, capital T truth. One is, yes, I'm the one I was looking for that love. And second, what I learned was this crave, this longing that we all have, that we think is about another person, is about having more of something outside of us. Deep inside is our longing for God. We want to know God so much that until we name that, we keep seeking outside. We move countries like I did 26 years ago, move cities, change relationships. And at that moment, I realized, oh my God, this is what we all have been seeking. It's myself, but who is myself, capital S, is the divine.
Yeah.
So we go in this long hero's journey that feels like climbing mountains and moving countries and crossing seas to realize like this whole time it has been here. So the hero's journey is almost like, well, you're gonna have to go. this long way, and it's interesting because when I did I only have done one big mushroom journey. I have microdosed a lot, but I did a journey a couple years ago. And I remember going to this first phase of the medicine, which was this dark cave that you described. It was dark, and it was like I was seeking for the same feelings of MDMA, which is not. It's completely different, and it felt dark. And I'm like, I caught myself in this space, like, I don't want to go through this. Get me out of here. And this
Mm.
voice, the spirit said, almost like, sweetheart, you doing that to yourself. We're not doing anything.
Wow.
You are doing that, which meant later in the journey, the message was, you humans can take the shortcut, which is basically in quantum physics, folding the paper, or you can take the long way, and you are choosing right now during this journey, you choosing the long way. And that moment was like, oh, so I have a power to change. And then all of a sudden I was in a lavender field, and I became the lavender. So I was like, oh, but I needed to hear that message. Is like, I was creating the darkness because there's this belief in us that we have to suffer, we have to go through the long path of healing. And at the same time, healing is available now, especially in these frequencies that we are living. Healing is available like in the fold of the paper.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't know, all this came out, but I had to share for some reason.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that because it's actually reminding me of just even a session I had earlier with a client of mine who is actually working through grief.
Mhm.
And so I feel like it's kind of coming full circle with this. But what she was reflecting on with me was that, she was so resistant towards the grief. She had lost her partner a few years ago, the love of her life, and
Mm,
has just been in deep grief, but was feeling before we started our work together that she shouldn't be feeling this anymore. Like, why is she still feeling this like intensity of this sadness, and just very resistant to feeling her grief. And just, I really do believe that I'm kind of a vessel and a conduit. It's not really my words or my doing in these situations, but what she needed to hear was really just permission to feel her grief and to be with her grief. And so today she was reflecting on the fact that Thanksgiving holiday for her, is always representative of like a family gathering, and she was always with her partner. So it's a very, very sad time for her to be experiencing all the same traditions and not have her partner with her, in embodied. And and yet this time, because she's working with the sacred mushroom through microdosing and starting to open up to feel and allowing that grief to be present, she was kind of laughing, but she's like, I've been crying every day. And yet also, it feels kind of good to be able to just be with so many feelings because it was so painful when I resisted it so much before. And now I'm just open to feeling. I'm just open to the tears, and there's so many, but it's like a floodgate because I think I was resisting it for so long. So now that it's
mhm.
easeful, or like, I wouldn't even use the word easeful. It's probably not easeful, but now that she's open to it, there's less resistance, and it's like what you're describing with it's like if you white knuckle it and clench and like hold on for dear life and not want to let go, it's so much harder. But as soon as you just release, and it's so much about that trust and that surrender that you're
Mm,
talking about, trusting that you're okay,
yeah,
trusting that it's going to be okay, you're going to move through it, because your body is designed to have these energies and charges move through as well. So it's just really honestly allowing the natural process to take place.
yeah, beautiful. And it makes me think that you were talking earlier about this beautiful intelligence of our body that contracts and expands through our lungs. It's here in the same about the tears. There's a reason we have tears,
Yeah.
is to process the grief. So um why in your experience, Ellen, why people fear grief so much?
I can speak from personal experience because I think being raised in a Taiwanese Chinese family
Hmm.
in the States, and losing my father when I was young, and having a mother who's now a single parent,
Mm.
want to be so strong for her kids. What strength was taught to her to look like was silence. You don't show your emotion, you keep it in, you stay strong, strong and stoic. It's like those two things go hand in hand. And I think coming from the culture that I do, even before all of that, even before the death, I remember being very young and watching a sad movie like Bambi or something, when the mother dies. And of course, it's like the most traumatizing thing for a child
It's
to watch,
awful.
you know? But also feeling such shame to cry at a movie. And I experienced this shame, it's not because anybody shamed me. It wasn't like my mom or my dad going, like making fun of me or going, why are you crying at that? No, it was something I think ancestral in my little body that was like, crying is bad, showing emotion is bad, you know? So I think when we talk about grief, in some ways, I feel like with the Western medical system, we've kind of pathologized it. There's this mentality or perspective that grief should only last from this time to this time. There's like a time limit, and especially when we're talking about the loss of a loved one, you you experience grief in this amount of time, and if it's prolonged beyond that, then there's something wrong with you. There's something psychologically wrong with you or emotionally wrong with you. You're imbalanced. Now you have to get on the meds. Now you have to do.
Yeah.
And so we pathologize it when really, I think in my journey in befriending grief, I very much see grief now as a friend.
Yes.
Grief is this teacher that exists and walks with me in my life. It never goes away, you know, because the reality is that every loss that we experience in life, whether it's a job or a job that we wanted to quit or a partner that we, needed to leave or a relationship we needed to, there's always grief. There's grief in joy. There's grief in joyful moments when we're experiencing that expansive high and like everything feels so beautiful and perfect because it's temporary.
Yes.
The loss is right there on the other side of that. And yet, I think we don't consciously think about it. But I have become like my favorite feeling now, honestly, is bittersweetness. Because
Mhm.
for me, I feel like it's the truest feeling or the truest emotion because you could feel the sweetness of life and you can also feel the sadness that this is not going to last, and that we're continuing to change. Um, but yeah, I feel like a lot of that resistance towards grief is programmed into us by the, especially the Western ideology. And also, I would say, even in my mother country of like Taiwan and China, I feel like there is just this, if you show your true feelings, your mushy insides, that means you're not strong. That makes you vulnerable to attack. So what do? You shut it down. You don't show your neighbor, your loved ones, what you're really feeling because it's safer that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's happened in Brazil for me. I grew up with a very stoic mother
Mm.
that had to support us because my father wasn't really a grown up, I'm going to say. So she had to support us, and there was a lot of stress, a lot of dysfunction. And she became very stoic, which for me was like, I can translate that also in having a mother that wasn't emotionally available. She wasn't warm or nurturing. And I done a lot of healing around that because even though my mother loved me very much, for a child, just having food, shelter,
Mhm.
school, clothes, a nice uniform is not enough because we need nurturing, we need the warmth, we need the emotionally available parent when we're crying. So I wasn't really allowed to express emotions to my mother. If I express any sadness or anger related to anything that was happening in the house, because I was the one, like, because then my stepfather came into the picture, who was very stoic as well. So I was surrounded by two stoic adults, and I was I was a sensitive child who wanted to express my emotions, but because that I that wasn't well received, I had to shut down those emotions in order to fit in and create tremendous suffering. And I had to suppress all those emotions, which of course led me to being called to do a lot of inner child healing, which I think is a great topic for us to jump in here, because you mentioned earlier that I love this. I never heard anybody saying like you did. All fear is fear of death.
Hmm.
And I know a lot of people are gonna say, "No, I don't understand this." Well, then I'm gonna share this, and I want your insight on this. So I'm gonna invite the listeners. Okay, maybe from your adult intellectual mind, that doesn't resonate at all. But if we put ourselves in the place of the child, when we
Mhm.
are abandoned, or we have this perception that our partners are abandoning us, or somebody's leaving us, or we have the perception that we don't belong. If we have a lot of wounds, if we hold a lot of inner child wounds, from the perspective of that child, that loss and abandonment is death.
Yeah.
And that's why we create so many coping survival strategies in childhood. And until we heal those parts of us, we still going to constantly be faced with this fear of death. So I love, because you just helped me to connect the dots here. When you said that first, I'm like, that's an interesting, of course, for the child is death. That's why the child develops personalities to survive all the dysfunction, the abuse, the stress, small T trauma, big T traumas, whatever that is. And that's exactly the part that, as we heal that, I'm finding for myself that my fear of death decreases every day. So it's all connected. This connection with the divine, the healing of the inner child, because I used to separate. It's like, well, when do I heal the inner child? But if I put all this focus on trauma, but then I'm not connect with the light. So then I'm going to live in the darkness. And I finally got to a place that this got resolved, because it's both, is holding the space for both, is addressing the trauma, which for some people can feel like, why I'm going to focus on trauma and darkness if I
Mm-hmm.
just want to be with God and the light. It's like, well, we know well that just going to God and the light doesn't work, because we've seen the consequences of that by just watching all these yoga spiritual gurus caught in
Mm-hmm.
this frauds and violence and sexual harassment. Why? Because they never did the work, and their ego took over, and they
Yes.
became what I call the most dangerous type of narcissist, which is the spiritual teacher.
I so cannot agree more.
They're very dangerous, because they just like the Catholic Church with the priests, the scandals, is the exact same thing. The same thing we find in the church, we also are finding the spiritual circles. So people need to have discernment, and and I think people doing this work are going to notice when somebody's really coming from the truth and somebody who's coming from the ego. So with all that said, let's go to inner child healing. It's interesting because I have people in my life who resist this work. They say,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, this is all about the inner child," right? It's like, well, it is. And they say, "Well, it's not always about the child. I can be upset about something that's happened." It's like, yeah, but if you're really upset and you upset for days, that is the child. So a lot of people resisting this work.
Yeah. I love the way you connected the fear of
Yeah.
death to the child, because I never thought about it in that way, but you are so absolutely correct on that. And it brings me to even there's this like sleep training technique where, and I think my parents actually did this with myself and my brother, where you're supposed to let the child, the baby, cry it out.
Yeah.
And by crying it out, they learn to stop crying. Why? Because nobody's going to come.
Yep.
But in their silence,
Mhm.
what it really is them giving up and resigning to death.
Yes.
That's exactly what's happening. So it's when you put those two together, I'm like, oh my God, that's exactly what it is. It's, you have to be able to go back to that inner child and reconnect to them and give them the things that they weren't able to receive at the time. And what's fascinating about this work to me, and I'm so curious about your perspective too, I it really shows to me how powerful our imaginations are and how powerful um, how do I even want to say this? It's like you are fully able to, it's not like rewriting the past, but bringing in a different energy when you are able to visualize a different reality for your inner child and provide these things for your inner child. And I think that was such a game changer for me. I'm trained in this modality called transpersonal energy healing, which is now, I think, better known as somagetics. But I think it's similar to somatic experiencing, which is why going into the body and allowing yourself to feel the feelings of the body, like the sensations, your body truly holds so much wisdom. And through the sensations, just being with it, inevitably, it always brings you back through time, back to some moment when you weren't able to receive the kind of nurturance that you really needed at that time. And that charge, that trauma charge, is still somehow lodged in your fascia, in your tissue, in your body, and needs permission to be able to be felt and ultimately released. For me, it's like all of the work that I've done, whether it's again walking with the medicine and the spirit medicine or mentorship or microdosing, it always goes back to inner child work. I really don't know how anybody can truly heal without doing this type of work. It's so essential to anything that you choose to do.
Maybe Eckhart Tolle did that, but I don't know how. I would love to have a conversation with Eckhart Tolle. It's like, okay, so because we do have these big spiritual teachers out there, and I love their messages. There's no judgment here. Is there's just a piece missing because
Mhm.
in a lot of their spiritual teachings, they talk so much about just being in the now, just connect with the now, just connect with God, connect with source energy, and everything's gonna be okay. It's like, okay, yeah, I done that, I tried that, and yeah, it's not okay if I'm going to disconnect from my body, because trauma is a disconnection from the body.
Right.
And like you, I practice somatic, so I think there's all these different names, but at the end of the day, somatic is all the same. It's going to the body. I train with Gabor Mate in his method called compassion inquiry. Also, the work I done with my teacher, healing my own inner child. I think her what she practices just heart centered work, bioenergetics, but it's the same thing. It's somatic. Go to the body and feel. And I love that you brought the word imagination, because, and this is why the inner child work might not, the work I do, for instance, might not resonate with everybody, because they need to be willing to tap into their imagination. Because in the healing, going back to the body, I let my clients describe what's happening in their body. And so I'm learning from my clients. So one client says, well, I see my inner child right now on the bottom of this dark well.
Mm.
Like, wow. So then I work with their imagination, and the ones that are able to really embrace imagination are the ones that, in a way, heal faster,
Yeah.
versus some people that like, oh, this kind of is sounding silly, or I don't want to do this inner child healing anymore. Well, one of my clients, I'm just going to share, and because he made this public too, one of my clients who, after 6 months, he said to me, I don't want to do this inner child healing anymore. It feels like it's weird, all this imagination. I'm like, okay. And he had a addiction to gambling.
Mm.
And a couple months later, he contacted me and he wanted to do a journey with mushroom. And I don't facilitate myself. I refer to somebody else, but I was a supporter. So we both were, in a way, the spiritual doulas there for him. And he had a, massive, he took 5 grams, and he had a massive journey. And I spoke to him a few weeks after that, and he said it cured his desire of gambling completely. He healed. So he's an example of somebody. And I think I'm sharing this because what I love about medicines is that I know when people hit these resistances, might be resistance to do the inner child healing, might be resistance to visit a member of the past, or a resistance to feel that grief. I think that's when the medicines can play such a beautiful role, because it gets through all the resistance,
Yeah.
because they're not going to have a lot of try. I mean, as much as they might try, but it's going to be like me. If you resist the medicine, the teachings of the medicine, you're going to stay in the dark cave for a little while, like I did.
Mm. Mm,
till you
mhm.
surrender, and then you're gonna go to the other side, which is the unknown, which you see what's possible for you and what is to be healed from that memory.
Yeah.
But I want to share that with you.
Thank you. You know, I find that the inner child work sometimes, like the medicine just brings it out
Hmm.
because what is the mushroom known as except the sacred little children, right? And
Yeah.
I find that like there's been several journeys that I've had the honor of companioning where the inner child comes through and the the person who's journeying, they have this like really beautiful experience. Most recently, I had a client who connected their child, like their child, they saw a vision of their child who's about 8 years old, go to their inner child who was about 7 years old through this photograph that they had brought to the altar. And her her son basically reached out a hand to her inner child and asked her if she wanted to play. And I think in this one vision, it completely shifted and opened her up to just what she needed to receive, you know, in that moment. And just realizing that these children or the people in our lives, particularly children, especially if you're a parent, I think the relationship that you have with your child can truly become the conduit to your reconnection to your own inner child. And I see it so often where it's like the age of the current child is always the age of the inner child that they need to connect with.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful. And I don't I don't know what's really happening there, but I just find that there's some it's almost like their child holds the key to unlock
Yes.
that door, you know?
Yes. Oh, I'm just vibrating here. It keeps vibrating. My crown chakra is very open right now. I love that you mentioned that because one one precious inside, or again, I'm gonna say truth with capital, because to me that feels truth that I learned by doing this work with the inner child, is that the inner child holds the key to connect us with the divine.
Mm,
It's almost like the more I heal my inner child, the deeper my connection with source energy becomes. And I'm gonna share this. So I experienced a lot of like up and downs in the last months. I think it's just all of us are being like, with all love and respect. I hope I don't disrespect anybody by saying this, but I felt many days like I was bipolar, because
mm,
I'll be in
mhm,
1 minute feeling great, the next minute it's like the grief and joy and grief. It was like a big roller coaster of
mm,
emotions. And something hit me this weekend. It's like, almost like I feel like this last 3 weekends have been away initiations for me. So I was drawn, for some reason. I saw a video. I was drawn to listen something by Wayne Dwyer.
mm,
Beautiful. And now he's in this beautiful spiritual form, which he's probably helping way more people in that form. It's definitely helping me. And I felt like when I get very curious about something, it's almost like, for me, curiosity is my intuition, is the voice of spirit talking to me. So I start listening to him, and all of a sudden I hear Wayne Dwyer's message in a very different level that I heard maybe 5 years ago, of course, because my level of consciousness is very different now. And I was sitting meditating, and I asked these questions like, why this work of manifestation really embody the concept that I am going to that place of really wanting to manifest a life that create a life that I want. Why this feels so different now than felt before? And the voice was, because you had to bring your inner child with you in this work. So I literally saw myself bringing my inner child from the basement, which is interesting that is in the second chakra. I literally saw myself bringing her up. It's like, now, that's why you feel this work is so different now, because you had to bring the inner child. You cannot leave the inner child in the basement and
mm,
go to this place where you want to manifest and create the life you want. It wasn't complete. And I remember, Ellen, I need to share this. I remember having so many, I'm gonna call tantrums as an adult, around all these books on the law of attraction and manifestation. I'm like, in a way, it made me feel worse because I felt like I was doing all wrong.
Mm,
And I
mhm,
couldn't find the
mhm.
answer in any book. I'm like, what am I doing wrong? And it actually took me even deeper into a dark night of the soul in that process, which I needed because I needed to disconnect a lot from a lot of these authors and books that focus so much on just the thinking brain. But the answer was like, you need to bring your inner child. If you want to manifest and really create a beautiful life, because I want to create a life that is for my highest and greatest good, I had to bring her with me because she is the key to creating the life, because she's the key to connecting with this field.
Wow.
So this is all discoveries. It's not about what's the science behind, but it's like the technology that is in us, even with the inner child healing, how this child holds the key, and the fact that you and I feel the same way, and you and I never had a conversation about this before, and we using the same words. So when I start listening to teachers using the same language, that's when I'm like, okay, I'm not the only one tapping to this field and accessing this intelligence, that the child holds the key.
Yeah.
There's truth here. You can't deny.
Yeah. 100%. It's wild the way it happens, but I'm like, I love these synchronicities because to me, I feel like, okay, we're on the path. We're on the right path. There's something
We
here.
are.
Yeah.
We are, as hard as it feels at times, and that's the drive and that's the motivation. Like, I am in the right path, and in the path, it's like taking a beautiful trip, a journey. We don't know the territory. The map is not the territory. There's that saying, you need to walk, and sometimes it feels hard, and there's a mountain to go across, and there is a dark forest to walk through, and we just have to have faith that we are exactly on the path.
Yeah. Oh, I love this conversation. This is so nourishing.
It is so nourishing. I really appreciate your opening to here. It's just, there's been a lot of synchronism last few days, and there's no accident. You and I are talking today
Mm,
about
mm.
this. So where do we go with this conversation now? What is, let's just take a moment, connect with your heart, and based on this conversation, let's, okay, I know where I want to take this. I see that you do a lot of readings with the cards, with the tarot, and I love your readings. So if Ellen is going to give a read now to all the listeners about what is going on in the collective right now, besides the grief, there's a lot of grief, but what is your this best way to describe what's happening in the collective right now?
Death.
Yep,
In one word, I think we're going through a big collective death.
me too.
And there is this sense that there's a lot of that white knuckling going on and this resistance to walking through that death portal. And there's just been I mean, I've been sitting with everything that's happening with, the conflicts, the wars, the genocides, all the killing, the violence, everything. And just sitting and really kind of feeling into it, allowing everything to sort of emerge and in this like very messy kind of like no real like I don't know what is up or down or side or you know what I mean? It's like I just feel like I'm just in it, I can't make sense of it,
Yep.
but I feel like that's kind of what happens when we're in a death, right? We feel so much and it's confusing and it's messy and you know all kinds of death I feel like is you can't escape the mess.
Mm-mm.
It's just messy, just like birth is messy, you know? And I think we're in this very, very messy moment of death in humanity where so many of these old systems are dying away. And I know that many of us have heard this so much over the last, 3 to 10 years or something, but so much is truly dying. And I really do think I follow astrology. I'm not a huge expert in it, but with Pluto moving from Capricorn into Aquarius, um, It's already dipped in, but next year it's going to be fully moving into Aquarius. It's truly the beginning of this new age, this new way of being, this new way of being in relationship. And so I feel like the parts that were not in right relationship with the earth, with the natural cycles, they're being challenged right now in a big way. A lot of these systems, you see, even like big celebrities and entertainment and things like that, that are kind of like losing their appeal, so to speak, or losing their power. You know, the power that they've held so long in society and in culture, being questioned. I think what's up is now down. What down is now up. Everything is getting so topsy turvy that in this moment, I feel like what I personally am being called to do is just sit, is
Yeah.
just sit and witness
Mhm.
and anchor to the earth, stay grounded, stay hydrated. Water has become a big recently, just as much water and intake of water, like eating your water, eating your hydration, making sure that your system can hold this energy. I think that's why I've been called to salt water and working with salt water as well. I actually started adding salt into my water to drink just because to remineralize my body. There's
Oh,
so many it's
I
like
got to interrupt here for a second
yeah.
because this is crazy. Few days ago, I was experiencing a lot of odd pains around my teeth, and I'm like, I asked my soul, my true self, like, okay, do I need to call a dentist? Do I need to make an appointment? Nope. This is energetics. Okay, a lot of my pains are in the last few years energetics. None of my pains are being a really cause to go to a doctor. I'm like, okay, and then I heard this voice like, every night for the next few days, put a lot of salt in your water and just just swivel in your mouth for at least 30 seconds, maybe a minute, salt in water.
Wow.
Now you are telling me you're called to salt in your water. It's like, okay, there's something about, and I've been called to do a lot of baths with Epsom salts now.
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
something about water and salt because, like you said, there's these energies. And sorry to interrupt you, but I want to
No.
add because so many of us are experiencing this. The invitation now is to sit, because if you're going to doing and getting busy, whew, things are going to get harder for you. And this is
Yeah.
not, it's just a fact. And I've been sitting more. I just recommitted to do an hour meditations again, just to sit and do nothing for an hour, meditate for a full hour instead of just 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, and just sit and use water and salt to
Wow.
ground, because the energies are very intense, especially here in the West, United States. It's dense because I feel like a lot of we've been we just have so many dark energies here, and the darkness has been revealed. I think, you talk about celebrities. I think Hollywood is falling down. A lot of systems are falling down. This war has pointed a lot of darkness in our country and how we participate. So I in that's a grief for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I love this place. I moved here, and now I really get to see the shadow of this culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm going through grief in that process, just with my own country that I dream my entire life to move to, and seeing that there's a lot of darkness here. Anyway, go on with the
Ah.
water.
Yeah. No, thank you so much for sharing that. Again, I just love these synchronicities. It really I got a chance to go to Kauai recently, and all I wanted to do was just be with the water and just swimming in the ocean multiple times a day and just being with the water. And it was there that I got this kind of like a download to create a grief circle, like a free offering for the community. But I was really called to work with salt water and fire, like water. So I literally named it water and fire because it is the salt water, I think, is needed to cleanse and to hold that grief as well. So much of my own personal practice has been soaking in the tub. And every time I go back to my Los Angeles loft, like I have a nice, it's like a soaking tub that I can kind of sink into. So I always sit with salt water, and inevitably it always ends up being a unplanned grief ritual where I'm just crying and pouring my tears into the salt water. And so I find that right now, specifically, salt water is really holding a lot of us. The salt being that cleansing
Yeah.
factor, and salt being the tears, right? And so
Yes.
we're joined by that, and water being an energy connector, an energy um, mover as well, a
Mhm.
conductor.
Conductor.
So I have people coming to the grief circle with a small vessel of salt water,
Mm.
knowing that the salt water is going to connect all of us, energetically. And we're working with the water and we're asking the water to hold our grief. And I don't know, it's just been really beautiful to see how water itself has been it's like the element along with earth to really like hold us in all of this.
It's like you said earlier, when you access the spirits, the guides, we're not alone,
Mm,
right? They're just being called, like we've been called, like use water, like use the element of water. That's consciousness. That is another, in a way, spirit helping us, the spirit of the salt, the spirit of the water. So if when we start opening ourselves, our channels, our intuition, start listening to these messages, and of course I had to share that with you because I think we love confirmations, right? We love to like, oh, I was called to use salt water too. So it's like, again, it's because this information is in the field. So what I want to share with the audience now is like, there's nothing special about Ellen or I.
mhm.
We just make the time and we choose to tap into this intelligence field, which you can call the field of God, the quantum field, the field of love, cosmos, because all the information is available to every single person.
Yes.
And for me, that's why I still text my friend Roseanne at times, other friends, because like I got this message, I still doubt myself. And the more I do this work, the less I'm learning not to doubt and also discern when it's the voice of the divine versus when it's the voice of my ego choosing something. So, that comes with practice. There's no other way around. You can learn discernment just by reading books.
Right.
So anyway, Ellen, we passed the hour here, and I just I'm loving this conversation with you. Just your energy, your gentleness, your softness. It's because I'm working on gentleness, softness myself. So your energy it's feeding my soul. It's very nourishing
Mm.
because I'm seeing a reflection of myself in you because I want to be softer. So before we say goodbye, is there anything else in your heart that you wanted to share?
I think along the same lines of softness, I think I just really want to invite everybody who's listening to just be really extra gentle with themselves in this
Oh,
moment.
thank you. Yes.
I think that we need that reminder because there are a lot of harsh edges right now and a lot of like jagged edges, I feel like a lot of
Yes.
hardness. And what I'm hearing a lot of is sometimes like guilt and shame that comes up
Yeah.
for speaking too much or not speaking enough or not really knowing how to navigate this time. And so I feel like we just all are being invited to be extra gentle with ourselves, with each other for sure, but also with ourselves. Because I feel like this is, I think some will say history has repeated itself in many ways, but also I think in this moment with our walk with technology, this is unprecedented. We have never seen so much violence in
Mm-mm.
our scrolls before. And
No.
so, yeah, just a call to extra nourishment and gentleness.
Thank you for that. My question, no, just coming from my curiosity, is the light winning?
To me, I feel like, okay, and this is how I see the world and how I see the universe. I see the light and the dark as a relationship
Mm-hmm.
and not so much a competitive one,
Mm-hmm.
but one that is, how do I even say it? It's like one that cannot live without the other. And so I think for me, what I'm realizing is that when there is a lot of darkness around, it's what allows the light to really show through, you know? And so in that way, I don't see it so much as who's winning or who's losing. I feel like it's kind of it's allowance, you know? It's like the presence of the darkness is allowing the light to come through in an even more piercing sort of way, in a more um I don't know how to like I see it as this it's a feeling. It's like almost like a shocking sort of like, it looks even brighter and more blinding. So in that sense, I feel like, yeah,
They work together.
they work together.
Yeah, that's a great answer, and that resonates 100%. Because for me, my own experience, the more darkness I see, let's just call watching this genocide happening in our
Mhm.
lifetime, which
Mhm.
is the worst for
Mhm.
us.
Mhm.
The more I see that, and I don't need to watch the news to know that that's happening. I just see it through my I just feel through my field.
Mhm.
The more I see that, I'm finding that stronger my light gets,
Mm.
because there's also like this desire to work with that darkness. And first of all, just I had a conversation with Roseanne in a podcast a few weeks ago about how important it is for us to dissolve this war, this separation inside us,
Mhm.
because what's happening there is not really out there.
Right.
It's a reflection of all of us.
Mhm.
It's not them and then us. Is we are one.
Mhm.
And if we want to do anything, yeah, if somebody's called to take actions, donate money, or go there and help the refugees, or work in a hospital, that's amazing. Do that if that's
Mhm.
your call. But also don't underestimate the power of dissolving our inner wars and how that shifts our energy completely. Because I really believe now energy is the most powerful technology we can use right now.
Yes.
Energy. And the more of us that tap into this technology of using our energy and really, really going to the energy of love, capital L, love, the more we do that, then the more we can work with this darkness too, and not make the darkness our enemies. But the darkness is really seeking the light.
Yeah.
The darkness wants the light, and because it transforms immediately. So like you said, there's no winning, it transforms.
Yeah.
And they do this dance, and it's not about, like you said, it's not about winning, because we cannot approach the darkness with this idea of I'm going to destroy the darkness, because
Right.
that is what's happening right now, is that
Right.
misperception of destroying the people who take the land and we're going to kill them. Well, no, it's just the same way that we're not going to destroy our egos. We're going to work with our ego, so our ego is no longer the master. The heart, love is the master, and the ego becomes the servant.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because the
Yeah.
ego is the aspects of that wounded child as well, that wanted to be seen, wanted to be heard. So if we don't address the darkness inside us, that voice of the darkness gets louder, and that's when we create disease,
Right.
emotional disease, mental disease, physical disease. So we need to dissolve these wars inside us. So
I
I guess
so
my
agree.
heart needed to share that.
Yeah, I so agree. Everything that you just said, it is like, as we're seeing all the violence outside of us, like externally, it really is a call to the internal. Like, what parts of yourself are you still hating, like self-hating and rejecting, you know?
Exactly, rejecting. So
Mhm.
that's the message. So, final question to my new guest here. If this was your last day in this physical plan and you could leave humanity one message that you knew that humanity was going to take it serious, what would that message be?
Wow. Just one message? I'm just kidding.
One message, one word. Sometimes it's just one word. Anything.
Yeah. No, I think what's coming up for me is it's something that was given to me by the sacred mushroom again, and it's just anchor the love. That
Mm,
is all we need to do. We just need to anchor the love. It really is that simple. But I think the way in which we go about doing it is not so simple. And the ability to do so is not so simple. And
Yeah.
that's where the healing comes in, right? Because unless you are operating from a place of wholeness, loving all the shadow parts, loving all the parts that you cringe at,
Yep.
truly like accepting every part of yourself, you can't anchor the love as fully as you possibly could without all those parts of you unified.
Yeah.
And then the same is happening, like, on that external level too. But I really do think this is our mission as
Yes.
embodied human beings. We have this vessel. We are the bridge between the heavens and the earth. We're here to anchor the love, plain and
Oh,
simple,
yeah.
you know?
I love it. And you use another word that resonates very much with me, which is the bridge. I see literally myself as the bridge. Yeah, we are bridges. And yeah, I'm gonna stop here. Otherwise, I'm gonna go for another hour. So, Ellen, this is so amazing. I would definitely invite you back, and I hope you come back. There's so much wisdom, and I want to dive deeper next time into the medicines and the importance of working with authentic truth guides, spiritual
Mhm,
doulas, I will call,
mhm,
that can hold people's hand through this death portal. Because, like you just said, anchor the love, and is not that simple.
mhm,
And this is where teachers come in, guides, teachers like yourself, myself, Roxanne, and many people are bringing to my podcast, and many amazing teachers out there. The medicine is a teacher itself, and you wanted to be sure you have a physical teacher there with you, because it's intense, it's not fun,
mhm, mhm,
it's liberating, and we have to walk through those dark caves, just like, I guess, if there's any Star Wars fans out there, Luke Skywalker had to walk into the dark cave, and Yoda was waiting right outside. And that's such a metaphor that I love Star Wars, because it's such a metaphor, the hero's journey. And he had to go into the cave and look at himself in the face. So it wasn't Darth Vader, it was himself. So that's kind of the medicine's journey do. So I just want to leave this kind of sign up for people interested in medicine journeys to, send me a message, or send a message to Ellen about how to approach. It's sacred. It's not something you want to approach casually. There's a
mhm,
preparation. There's then the set and the setting. And then there's a part that I think a lot of people are not valuing enough, which is the integration after.
yes.
You
Thank you.
can go through a journey where you go through so much death and not have proper integration after, because you need to learn how to integrate all that into this 3D world. And this is why
Mhm,
some people spiral, some
mhm,
people can go into deep depression, anxiety after, because it's not the medicine fault, is lack of integration. You
mhm,
cannot just expect to come back from those realms back to this 3D world and feel like everything is going to be rainbows and unicorns. So I just felt the need to share this before we say goodbye. So please seek proper guidance.
Thank you for that. It's so important.
Yeah. So what's the best way for people to find? And I recommend everybody to follow your Instagram for sure, because I love your posts. So are you taking new clients, and what's the best way to contact you?
Sure. Instagram is a great way. You can DM me. I do offer a free 45-minute discovery call to any new clients who are interested in mentorship or a medicine journey or microdosing journey. So I have programs in all of those different fields or areas. Um, Best way, or I guess you can go to my website,
Okay.
tripwithellen.com,
Yeah.
and my Instagram is tripwithellen as well.
And I'll put all your information under the show notes.
Beautiful.
Ellen, I feel like we sisters from another life. So thank
Truly.
you
Thank
so much. I learned so much in this conversation with you, and thank you for also giving me the space to share. I share a lot with you, so I feel like it was a really beautiful mutual exchange of love and wisdom here, and just also a way to hold each other's hand and say we are in this together. We got each other. We're doing this together. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the work you're doing. Thank you for healing yourself and
you.
helping others to heal, because I know that benefits our entire planet. So I bow to you. Thank you so much. Namaste.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure and honor.